Yes, you read that right. Amtrak is getting a new train, and they're calling it the Mardi Gras. A fitting title for a train service which will consist of 2 daily round trips between New Orleans, Louisiana, and Mobile, Alabama. The train will cost $15 and make 6 stops along its 145-mile journey. After New Orleans, the Mardi Gras will stop at Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, then Gulfport, Mississippi, then Biloxi, Mississippi, and then Pascagoula, Mississippi, before reaching its terminus in Mobile. It'll be quite the scenic train ride too, as the tracks run right along the Gulf Coast for a majority of the trip. I must admit, when Amtrak announced this train back in August 2024 for a June 2025 start date, I literally booked a flight to New Orleans that very same day in anticipation, just so I could be one of the first ones to ride it and tell you guys all about it. But this wouldn't be an American passenger rail project without numerous construction delays now, would it? And that's exactly what happened. The Mardi Gras was pushed back from June to July and now to August 18th, which now seems to be the official revenue service start date. Hey, that's great and all, but I already booked my flight from Los Angeles, which means I'm now out a couple $100, which is less great. But then it hit me. What if I just drove the Mardi Gras route instead? I know, the whole point of covering the Mardi Gras is to actually get a sense of what it's like to ride it. But maybe that's not actually the best way to understand this train. If I follow the train tracks on the road, we can actually spend time in some of these small, often forgotten towns of the Deep South and try to understand just why this train in particular was even a priority for Amtrak to begin with. Today, we'll start here, New Orleans Union Passenger Terminal, the western terminus for the Mardi Gras. It's a lot more mid-century modern here than I expected, given how French colonial, Creole, and Victorian the rest of the urban core is. Of course, New Orleans has had many train stations throughout the decades, being a natural southern terminus for all routes to and from the Midwest, but most of these stations have been lost to history. This passenger terminal opened in 1954, replacing the old New Orleans Union Station that had been built here in 1892 for the Illinois Central Railroad. Up until Amtrak took over America's passenger rail operations in 1971, Union Terminal was home to Illinois Central Railroad, the Louisville and Nashville Railroad, Southern Pacific Railroad, Missouri Pacific Railroad, Texas and Pacific Railway, and Southern Railway. The Mardi Gras will operate on a section of tracks originally laid in 1870 by the New Orleans, Mobile, and Texas Railroad, a company which was later absorbed by the Louisville and Nashville Railroad 10 years later. Throughout the next century, the L&N Railroad would operate long-distance passenger service on this corridor with 3 main lines. The Pan American from New Orleans to Cincinnati via Mobile, the Hummingbird from New Orleans to Detroit via Mobile, and the Gulf Wind from New Orleans to Jacksonville via Mobile. The L&N Railroad was a predecessor to the modern-day CSX Freight Railroad Company, whose freight trains we'll certainly be seeing a lot of today, as they now own the tracks the Mardi Gras will operate on. Today, New Orleans Union Terminal is the terminus for 3 other Amtrak lines besides the Mardi Gras: the Sunset Limited to and from Los Angeles, the Crescent to and from New York City, and the City of New Orleans to and from Chicago. Amtrak's Sunset Limited actually used to extend all the way to Mobile, Alabama, and all of the stations and tracks we'll be visiting today were stops along that route that ran from 1993 to 2005. But Hurricane Katrina ended up being the cause of service discontinuation past New Orleans, as the storm wreaked havoc not only on the train stations, but on the tracks themselves. The Mardi Gras is essentially a revival of that old portion of the Sunset Limited, and all of the L&N lines to Mobile that came before it, dating back to 1870. So with a brief history lesson out of the way, I think we're ready to begin. Leaving New Orleans Union Terminal, the tracks run parallel to US 90 as the Mardi Gras makes its way out of the city, so naturally I'll be following the tracks on US 90 as well. After the tracks make their way through the swampy marshes of southern Louisiana and into the state of Mississippi, the Mardi Gras will arrive at its next stop, about 50 miles east as the crow flies, into the city of Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. Population, roughly 9,000. The city itself has a long and storied history dating back to its Spanish colonial roots in the 1780s, and then as a battleground for the Battle of the Bay between the British and the American armies during the War of 1812. But I was here for this. Bay St. Louis Station, erected in 1929 by the Louisville and Nashville Railroad. The station is a modified version of the traditional Spanish colonial revival architecture style, subtly weaving in Art Deco elements with its detailed ornamentation and beautiful symmetry. The building looks like something I would see rail fanning around Southern California, which just goes to show you how far-reaching and long-lasting Spain's influence on American culture was and still is. In anticipation of the Mardi Gras, Amtrak has recently constructed ADA-compliant platforms as well as erected some new signage. Unfortunately, the inside of the station was closed on the Sunday that I visited, but every other day of the week it houses the city's Mardi Gras Museum and is open to the public from 10 to 4. The building itself wasn't always this muted off-white color. It originally looked like this, a bright orange and white color. That was until its abandonment in the 1970s, but then it was restored in 1996, and then again heavily damaged in 2005 by Katrina, before being restored again in 2011, and then finally repainted to its current colors during Amtrak's ADA improvement project between 2023 and 2024. Why they didn't choose to just repaint it the original colors, I have no idea. Bay St. Louis Station isn't exactly located in the city's traditional Main Street downtown, but instead in an area that developed entirely around the railroad, which the city is now calling its Depot District. Aside from City Hall and the main city park directly in front of the Amtrak station, the Depot District is home to this collection of early 20th century commercial buildings known as Depot Row. You know, I'd never thought I'd see a mixed-use block of Victorian-era structures deep in small-town southern Mississippi, but that's exactly what this is. A quaint mix of turn-of-the-century shops and warehouse space side by side some brand new housing. How about that? Today, you can find butcher shops, a brunch spot, a Pilates and hot yoga studio, and a few other restaurants and clothing stores filling in the commercial units. And even on a sleepy Sunday in the swamps, there were plenty of people patronizing the local businesses, which I was glad to see. Even during my short time here, I got the sense that locals really cherish their little slice of railroad history here. Exiting Bay St. Louis eastward, the railroad tracks cross over the actual bay itself, running parallel to US 90 once again, before making it back onto land to begin the true Gulf Coast running section of the Mardi Gras. Back in the late 1800s, the Louisville and Nashville Railroad built many stations between New Orleans and Mobile, as you can well see from this 1954 L&N timetable. One of those stops was here, in the city of Pass Christian, Mississippi. You know, I wasn't planning on stopping here since it won't be a stop along the Mardi Gras, but I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to check out yet another small town along the tracks, especially with how much I enjoyed Bay St. Louis. Pass Christian is even smaller though, at around 6,000 residents. When I was here, I learned that this place was once a famous resort town prior to the Civil War, and a favored location for the beach and summer homes of the wealthy elite from New Orleans. To me, the town seemed reminiscent of the coastal Atlantic towns of the Carolinas, and especially those along the Outer Banks. There's so much to see along this stretch of the Mardi Gras tracks, it was tough deciding what was worth stopping for and what wasn't. I swear it felt like every 3 minutes I was passing by a historical landmark or town site of some kind. I even caught a glimpse of the Beauvoir Estate, the post-war home of Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederacy. And I would be lying if I said I didn't stop for a Sunday stroll along the white sandy beaches too. Eventually though, I arrived at Gulfport Station, about 15 miles east of Bay St. Louis. Gulfport is the second most populous city in Mississippi, with a population of around 73,000 people, and growing. The station itself was built in 1904 as a true Union station, constructed at the junction of the Gulfport and Ship Island Railroad and the Louisville and Nashville Railroad's main lines. Today, it's the home of the Gulfport Museum of History, which was also closed during my visit. Sundays in the South, ladies and gentlemen. At the very least, I got to peek inside, and I was able to make out some of the station's gorgeous details, like its original tile flooring and marble wall wainscoting. It's clear that this station has been taken care of over the past century, even throughout its post-passenger rail era. Visiting this new city in Mississippi really hammered home just how overlooked this part of the country really is. Although there's not a whole lot going on around the station and around the downtown area today, on a Sunday, It's obvious that at one point in this country's history, Gulfport was a major logistical point of interest, and even a summer destination for some tourists, as it turns out. While walking through the downtown, I discovered that before the casino-filled shoreline and car-centric Main Street conversion, Gulfport was home to a plethora of shipping ports, streetcar lines, and bustling commercial corridors. You can see that history so clearly on the buildings that have survived. On some buildings, that history is more obvious, but even the more weathered and lived-in buildings have their own stories to tell, with each and every remaining ghost sign. As you can see, I really like finding old ghost signs in places like this. After World War II, downtown Gulfport was a place of urban decay, characterized by crumbling buildings, high crime, and parking lots where city life used to flourish. It was only about a decade ago when Gulfport initiated a wide-scale urban renewal effort. Much of the downtown was cleaned, restored, and preserved, and now the downtown surrounding the train station is slowly seeing small business growth back where it belongs. It's not exactly thriving like it was during the streetcar era, and vacancies still plague a majority of the commercial space here, but it's clear that work is being done to try and change that, and I'm glad I got to see it. With Amtrak bringing back passenger rail to the city for the first time in decades, this is the perfect time for Gulfport to build more mixed-use density where these underutilized car-centric lots stand in downtown today. Gulfport needs to attract small businesses back to the 25th Avenue commercial corridor, and I think by adding more dense housing and maybe even reintroducing a vintage streetcar service where the interurban line used to run, it would do just that. For now though, Gulfport Station seems ripe and ready for Mardi Gras service. So, we'll continue. Moving just 13 miles east of Gulfport, we arrived at Biloxi, population 50,000. Biloxi's Amtrak station is bold, daring, a true specimen of mid-century minimalism. A place that begs the question, just how bare can an Amtrak station be before it can no longer even be considered a train station? In all seriousness, what even is this? I mean, you're telling me that this is supposed to be an Amtrak station? It's literally just a covered platform. I've seen bus stops more sophisticated than this. But there's something else that's odd about Biloxi Station too. Hiding beneath Amtrak's new ADA construction, there seems to be the remnants of a building's foundation. It turns out there was a station here before. In fact, quite a few stations. Biloxi's first L&N depot building was built here back in 1870, but was later rebuilt in 1901 along with much of the town due to a massive fire. The 1901 depot was situated in front of the since demolished Kennedy Hotel off Renoir Street. There was once a city park around here and a bunch of thriving business fronts, and the depot did pretty well for the Louisville and Nashville Railroad. In the mid-1960s, the wood frame depot was replaced with a more modern metal frame structure, but as passenger rail ridership fell off a cliff afterwards, it was short-lived, and was dismantled in the early 70s. Now, the death of passenger rail in Biloxi coincided with the decay of its downtown as a whole, and the area has been a work in progress ever since. Development projects razed much of downtown Biloxi throughout the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and almost no pre-war buildings, business fronts, or structures of any kind remain today. All of the parks, hotels, and shops have been replaced by car-centric underdevelopment. But the silver lining that we can't forget is that passenger rail is finally coming back to Biloxi, which is certainly something to celebrate. Now, right across from the Amtrak station is the Biloxi Transit Center, owned by the Coast Transit Authority, the primary provider of mass transportation in the Gulfport-Biloxi metro area. The facility is also used by Greyhound, and I think it's safe to assume it'll be used by Amtrak in some capacity too, even if it's just for restroom access. For now though, I guess Biloxi Station is ready for passenger rail? Let me know what you think of this down in the comments section. Continuing on US 90 22 miles east, we arrived at my favorite stop along the Mardi Gras, Pascagoula Station. Although Pascagoula's population of roughly 22,000 is quite small, the city's history and preservation efforts are anything but. Much like the cities we've already visited, Pascagoula evolved around the timber, fishing, and shipbuilding industries. In fact, it once became the site of the Ingalls Shipbuilding Company, the biggest employer and shipyard on the Gulf Coast, known best for its crucial role in the construction of Navy vessels during World War II. The city's pre-war Main Street is lined with shops and restaurants in what the city is calling its flagship district. And obviously, it too once had a streetcar system running through it. Many of the buildings here are of the streetcar era, and even have National Register designations on them too. It's yet another city along the Mardi Gras where you can see so clearly how much work has been done to restore and preserve its history. And those restoration efforts certainly carry over to the Amtrak station itself. Almost all of the original L&N depot buildings along the Mardi Gras line have been destroyed, either to build a new station like in Bay St. Louis and Biloxi, or to make way for something non-rail related altogether. Almost all of them are gone. Except one. And you're looking at it. This sole surviving depot is a perfect example of L&N's uniform architectural design pattern. Take a look at Pass Christian Station, Ocean Spring Station, or even the surviving L&N stations beyond the Mardi Gras. They were all constructed in a nearly identical Victorian vernacular style, a style common across even other rail lines built throughout the eastern US at the time. Pascagoula's was built in 1904 and was added to the National Register of Historic Landmarks in 1974, when its condition was listed by the city's Urban Renewal Agency as deteriorated. Though the Mardi Gras has put a full stop on that decay, and as of July 2025, crews have been hard at work restoring the structure. Though not entirely for Amtrak's use as it seems. It turns out the depot will house a brew house for the Chandeleur Island Brewing Company, who is adaptively reusing the building as their second location. Coincidentally, I happened to walk by their first location as I was exploring downtown Gulfport earlier in the day. It's unclear if Amtrak and the brew house will share the depot space, but I would certainly hope so. I mean, the new Amtrak platform was built into the side of it, so I'd assume so, but I could also see passenger space being limited to an outdoor area between the platform and the depot. Regardless, one of the coolest things I found here was this incredible, untouched Amtrak artifact on the building's facade. This vintage logo and signage was used by Amtrak from its inception in 1971 to the year 2000. Maybe it's just because I'm younger than the former logo itself, but I got a kick out of finding this. And it really is so rare to see, too, especially in its current condition. It's important to keep in mind that Amtrak did try reviving passenger service here twice in both the 80s and the 90s with the Sunset Limited train. But ever since Katrina, this station has essentially been left to rot, until very recently. Here's to hoping that the Brewhouse, Amtrak, and the Mardi Gras have a long and successful tenure here in the city of Pascagoula. But with that out of the way, I hopped back on US 90, crossed over the Mississippi-Alabama border, and continued down the final 40-mile stretch of the Mardi Gras, before arriving at its eastern terminus in the city of Mobile, Alabama. Population 187,000. You know, I fully expected to roll up to Mobile and explore this place, the former Mobile station built for the Mobile and Ohio Railroad in 1907. Sadly though, this isn't where the Mardi Gras will be terminating. In fact, neither Amtrak nor the L&N Railroad ever made use of this beautiful rail hub on the north end of downtown Mobile. Instead, L&N and Amtrak operated service at a station on the southeast side of downtown. The original L&N depot was built in 1881 and was used until 1956, when L&N demolished it to build a brand new mid-century modern station, similar to what happened in Biloxi. Amtrak also used that station for a short time until it too was demolished after Hurricane Katrina. The new 2025 Amtrak station is being built on that very same site, and is scheduled to open come August 18th. Eventually, the Amtrak station will look something like this, featuring a large platform area with plenty of seating, a few shelters, and even a 2-story station house for some reason. You know, Alabama is a really interesting population case study, since it's only one of 25 states growing at a rate above the national average. Alabama is seeing explosive growth in and around the city of Huntsville in the north. But that means the state is rapidly losing population in its traditional big 3 cities of Birmingham, Montgomery, and you guessed it, Mobile. Urban decay and high crime rates in downtown have seen Mobile's residents flee the city for greener pastures. And even though the city is undertaking a massive citywide urban renewal effort, it may just be too little, too late. I'll link to that PDF in the description if you're interested in reading it. As it stands, the city of Mobile will continue to be under construction for some time, even after the Amtrak station is built, and I do look forward to revisiting once the dust has settled in the coming years. Hopefully by then, the city will have built more dense, mixed-use housing in areas that need it the most, and fortified its historic urban core too. You know, if the Mardi Gras train does well and outlives its failed predecessors, Mobile Station probably won't be its eastern terminus for long. The Southern Rail Commission, who's responsible for the development of the Mardi Gras to begin with, has already received federal funding to plan for further route expansion, with the goal to get the Mardi Gras past Mobile, through Montgomery, and terminating in Atlanta. Ideally, those plans will evolve into additional connections between Atlanta or Montgomery and all of Huntsville, Chattanooga, and Nashville. A metropolitan triangle experiencing unprecedented growth, only without any rail connection, locally or Amtrak. So many of the cities in the Deep South are so far behind where they should be in terms of inter- and intra-city passenger rail. And while the Mardi Gras is just the first step, this fact alone concerns me when projecting the long-term success of the Mardi Gras and any other new line in succession. In places like Japan and Europe, passenger rail not only provides connection between cities of all sizes, but passenger rail also acts as a replacement to cars within the very cities themselves. This is where I think Americans have been given the short end of the stick. Our city, state, and federal government agencies are just not prioritizing funding passenger rail transit at the levels they should be. And yeah, it's contributing to things like traffic deaths, suburban sprawl, an increase in the cost of living, and just so many more things that are detrimental to a healthy and sustainable American way of life. Being forced to drive a car without any other options isn't actually good for human beings. It's so important to the success of the Mardi Gras and other future Amtrak trains that city, state, and the federal government agencies work together to ensure America's rail future reaches its highest possible potential. And the concerns I've raised have to be addressed in order for that to happen. So while I am very excited for the Mardi Gras and hope it does great and spurs even more passenger rail service in the Deep South and beyond, there's a lot more work here to be done, both on and off the rails. So, is the Mardi Gras the beginning of the rebirth of passenger rail in the Deep South? Or is it again destined to fail as a result of lackluster long-term planning and cooperation? Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. For now though, I'll see you next week from 4th place.